This is my review of Terrarium, the third season episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Thrown through a wormhole and marooned on a desolate moon, Ortegas battles the elements to survive, but complications arise when she discovers she's not alone. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, Uhura leads efforts to rescue her lost friend and crewmate, determined to find a solution, no matter the cost. The usual heads up, this review contains spoilers, so if you've not seen this episode yet, maybe go check it out first before watching any further. It's only taken nearly 3 seasons, but Strange New Worlds has finally given us a proper Ortegas episode. Melissa Navia's hotshot pilot has been an important member of the crew since the show's start, but compared to the rest, she's never really had much of a spotlight beyond a few funny moments and bits of banter on the bridge. Well, that changes with Terrarium, an episode that finally puts the character front and centre. I, for one, am pretty happy that we're finally getting an Ortegas episode. I know there are plenty of fans out there who aren't sold on the character with her cocky, snarky, flyboy attitude, but I've always enjoyed what she brings pretty much for these exact reasons. She gives me Tom Paris kind of vibes, the wisecracking maverick, a real pain in the arse, but someone you'd always want at the helm whenever things get hairy. But as much as I enjoyed seeing Ortegas finally get her time to shine, Terrarium, while a marked improvement over previous episodes, is an episode that I found frustrating for a number of reasons. The episode is another example of the show as a repurposer of old ideas rather than a creator of new ones. This is essentially a Vidian patchwork of a bunch of things we've seen before. TOS episodes, the Galileo 7 and Arena, TNG episodes, the Enemy and Darmok, and Enterprise's Dawn, to name just a few. The episode also borrows liberally from non-Trek as well, with films like Enemy Mine and The Martian clearly having an influence. Now, to be clear, repurposing and remixing old ideas doesn't necessarily make this bad. Trek has a long history of taking old ideas and putting a new spin on them. And there are some good things here, which I'll talk about more in a minute, but overall, this episode struggles to sufficiently transform all its various familiar parts into something that feels fresh, original, and completely satisfying. The initial setup, an unexpected spatial anomaly resulting in a shuttle crash on a hostile moon, is a Trek trope as old as time. We've seen this many times before. Cut off from the Enterprise, trapped in a dangerous environment with supplies and hope in desperately short supply. This is almost a beat-for-beat recreation of the classic TOS first season episode, the Galileo 7. We then get a wrinkle of complexity as Ortegas realizes she's trapped on this nightmare rock with a Gorn, a discovery that predictably unearths a lot of feeling after her traumatic near-death experience at the start of the season. If you've seen any Trek, you pretty much know where this is going from the off, and it's not long before the two put aside their differences and actually begin to become friends of sorts despite a pretty tricky language barrier. And look, I am very soft for this kind of thing. The idea of overcoming fear and hatred, putting them aside and finding commonalities with your enemies is the kind of timeless concept that Star Trek was built on. We've seen it done loads of times before, yes, but the sentiment remains incredibly powerful and resonant. To me, this is what Trek is all about, and in today's trying times, I think it's a message that's well worth repeating ad nauseum. The problem here is in the execution. Ortegas goes from a seething, murderous hatred of the Gorn to literally playing chess with it in what feels like a couple of quick scenes. It's an arc that can work really well if you give it the space to breathe, but here the transition feels rushed and a little hard to find completely believable. A good fix here would have been to tone down the sentimental, almost Spielbergian vibe. Have Ortegas and the Gorn still be somewhat standoffish, but committed to working together to survive, and have a sense of camaraderie and then friendship emerge a little more slowly. I also have mixed thoughts on the episode's use of Ortegas herself. Nothing wrong with Navia's performance, she's great and makes the most of her showcase episode. No, my issues lie more in elements of her dialogue. The episode leans heavily on her talking to herself, clearly meant to keep the audience engaged while she's alone, but I found most of this to be pretty clunky and at times even a bit patronising. Some moments work, particularly early on when she's channeling Matt Damon in The Martian as she sciences the shit out of her situation, talking herself through the process of creating an atmospheric condenser to make drinking water. But the majority of the time this feels a bit overdone. It's almost as if the writer didn't trust the audience to pick up on Navia's performance through body language, facial expressions, or even the flick of an eye. And thinking about it, how much more powerful could this have been if it were almost an entirely silent episode? Knowing how Strange New Worlds loves a gimmick, it's kind of strange that this isn't what we get. Going one step further, the show could have even had Ortegas and the Gorn learn to communicate through sign language. A much smarter solution than the implausible MacGyver-esque translator, and also a great way to incorporate representation of the deaf and hard of hearing community, which is something I don't think we've seen on Trek since early TNG. In any case, there's way too much dialogue here, to the point where I felt the episode was going out of its way to spell everything out. This is never a good idea. I don't know about you, but I can't stand it when I'm watching something that doesn't seem to trust that the viewer is capable of putting things together. I think we're more than capable of handling a little bit of subtlety. Don't treat us like idiots, please. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, the crew are working round the clock, desperately trying to find a way to rescue Ortegas, who, after falling through the wormhole, is now beyond the reach of their sensors. Sensors. This subplot is driven almost exclusively by Uhura, who pushes hard to get a daring rescue plan greenlit by the captain. Now, I like Celia Rose Gooding a lot. I think she's a very consistent presence on the show, but here something feels off. Her depiction of Uhura has always been one that's bursting with youthful energy, as well as an open nervousness that's very much in line with the younger generations of our real world. But this feels more pronounced than ever here, to the point where I found myself questioning her professionalism as a Starfleet officer. Early in the episode, when the bridge crew are weighing up options, recognizing the slim odds that Ortegas is still alive, Uhura comes across as very combative with her colleagues, but not in a way that's friendship bleeding into duty. It's more how someone would act if they were arguing with a stranger on Twitter. Way over the top and far too overwrought for my liking. Even more troubling is her decision to manipulate the data so Pike will approve the rescue mission. This could have been great. Initially, this felt like Strange New Worlds' version of Sisko's morally dubious choices we saw in Deep Space Nine's classic 6th season episode In the Pale Moonlight. But unlike that episode, which deftly communicates the troubling murkiness of Sisko's actions, this episode goes out of its way to shrug off Uhura's actions, clearly positioning her stance as the right one. We even get a moment where the episode essentially absolves her, with Pike admitting he would have done the same thing. Okay, if that's true, Chris, why send Uhura to go crunch the data in the first place? Why not just go ahead with the rescue mission? This lack of discipline has become a frustrating trend this season. On multiple occasions now, the crew have made questionable, even dangerous choices, but the show refuses to hold them accountable. Great Trek over the years has shown our heroes making tough decisions, living with the consequences of their actions, and growing as a result. What does Uhura learn from all this? Break the rules, lie to your crewmates and captain, risk the lives of over 4,000 colonists, but it's fine, it worked out. Don't worry about it. A much better ending would have been Pike learning what Uhura did, reprimanding her for her recklessness, but then admitting off the record that he would have done the same thing. This way you get the discipline, the rightful condemnation, the same outcome, but now with a sense of growth for the character. And let's talk about the ending, where the episode almost threatens to come off the rails. Ortega sets off an explosion that ignites the moon's atmosphere. I'm not sure how the moon has an atmosphere, considering it routinely skims the neighbouring gas giant, but just go with it. It's actually another moment that's lifted from the end of the Galileo 7, and it's a move that soon has Ortegas rescued, but not before La'an instinctively guns down the Gorn. It's a moment that feels more than a little signposted. The Gorn did seem pretty set on dying, and I can't imagine any universe where Pike would let this thing on the ship, despite his arc on the show now being just letting his crew do whatever the fuck they want. It's also another instance where the show has killed off its alien of the week, yet another downer ending where I feel previous iterations of Trek would have fought harder for something more upbeat and hopeful. I hate feeling sad every time I watch this show. Can we have an ending where everyone lives for once? Please? But what I did find surprising was what happened next, as the sparkling star that Ortega spotted earlier in the episode turns out to actually be the Metrons, making their first appearance since TOS's Arena. Now, I was never a big fan of the Metrons in that episode. Go check out my review of Arena to find out why, but I think what we get here is pretty consistent with their initial appearance, these androgynous, godlike aliens who come across as curious, if a little arrogant and mean-spirited. My main issue with this late-stage twist is it's another example of modern Trek's obsession with tying everything back to legacy lore. Did this episode really need to be a direct prequel to Arena? Does everything have to be connected to pre-existing stuff in this universe? I find this frustrating and really revealing of just how uncreative this show can be. I think this shrinks the universe. Despite all its various unoriginal ingredients, the episode still had the chance to do something relatively new, an opportunity for the show to contribute lore of its own. But no, this had to lean into the familiar, and I can't help but feel that it's another missed opportunity for the show to be its own thing. All in all, Terrarium is emblematic of Strange New Worlds as a whole. It's a show that has all the tools to deliver something special, but mostly squanders this by relying far too often on rehashing old stories rather than trying to tell new ones. It's a fun show for the most part, but all too often I feel like I'm just watching a greatest hits mashup, a collection of ideas lifted from other, better episodes that I'd much rather be watching. Still, this isn't a bad episode. It's actually pretty decent, a marked improvement on the previous couple of episodes. I love that we finally got to spend time with Ortegas, and despite its flaws, I still found quite a lot of the drama to be pretty engaging. But again, this is an episode that, with a couple of tweaks and a little bit more daring, could have been great rather than just good, and for that reason, I'm giving Terrarium a 6 out of 10. But what did you think of this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How would you rate it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more Star Trek reviews, and until next time, live long and prosper.